Hello and welcome to Mental Health Mondays. We are so happy that you are here with us. This is a program that is sponsored by Living Manna Church. And we just are so thankful that we are covering these topics that affect everyone's life in one way or the other. We were gone last week, but the week before, our last episode, we were talking about depression and predictors, 10 predictors, 10 hits, if you will, to that can lead to depression. And we are going to continue that discussion today. So I would like to welcome my co-host, Dr. Ricardo Whyte. It's good to see you.
Good to see you as well, sis.
Yes, it is just so exciting to be here again. We want to know where you guys are watching from. We like to see what state, what city, what country. So if you could just put in the chat and just say where you're watching from, we'd like to welcome you personally to Mental Health Mondays, and we are excited about today's topic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I hope you got some time to kind of refresh and celebrate the nation's independence. Give
Yes,
some mental
yes.
health of yourself.
Yes, we were able to do that and spend time with family. So I hope you were able to do that as well.
Absolutely.
Um, yes, welcome. We have people there in Pennsylvania. All right, welcome.
Trinidad and
Tobago
Tobago. Awesome.
from Belize,
Canada.
Canada.
Old Canada.
Yes, as you guys are putting in the chat where you're watching from, I just want to remind everyone to visit our Instagram page and to like it. So if you are on Instagram, our Instagram page is My Living Manna. So and it's right there on the screen. So just follow us there. I shouldn't have said like it. That's a Facebook thing. Follow us on Instagram.
Oh, absolutely.
And so that helps with all the algorithms and all that stuff that I really don't understand, but they say that awakens the algorithms and things start spreading and connecting. And yeah, I don't know how to explain it or understand it, but it helps.
Use some of that digital currency that you have and
Yeah.
share
Yes.
and share,
Yes.
because this is the least we can do. A nice little easy thing to help us
Yes.
enhance our impact
Yes.
in spreading God's word, but also just spreading content that
Right.
is applicable, relevant, and that you can actually put in place in your life. So
Yes.
yeah, help us do that. Absolutely.
And that is our goal. We want to be practical and just so you can have ways. I mean, this is for all of you who are watching, of course, but we want you to share it with your families and friends, especially we're talking about mental health. That's such a big topic that is always in the media. Hollywood talks about it. Everybody is dealing with with this topic. And so we just want the people that you know to know that Living Manna Church is also dealing with it every week on Mental Health Mondays. And we welcome your questions and comments as we get going. We want to hear from you and be able to answer as many questions as we can as well. So, yes.
Absolutely. So
So,
we
with that said, we got people in New Jersey and Georgia, and I missed some
Papua
names.
New Guinea,
Yes.
Georgia,
Welcome.
yeah,
Welcome.
Boston.
Boston.
That's
Well,
awesome. So
yeah.
yeah, we Dr. Neil Nedley's 10 hits are what inspired um, our discussion, and so we thought that we would sort of support you in providing you some of our perspectives on these 10 hits, but then also providing a setting where you can ask your questions. So last time we met, we talked about genetics.
Mm-hmm.
We probably talked about addiction too. Did we talk about
We
addiction, or is
we
that the
did
one?
talk about addiction. I know we ended with addiction,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like we did do circadian rhythm just because I remember talking about maybe that was another program, just about how important sleep is and what happens to our minds and our brains when we don't get sleep. And I remember sharing a story about how my husband and I had decided, like, okay, when we don't get enough sleep, we're just not going to talk about certain things because we both get easily irritated. So I don't know if that was in that discussion or another time. I just, for some reason, I
Right.
remember.
like, was it there or was it, Sabbath school class? So yeah, it's
I
a
know
real,
it was on Mental Health Mondays, but
right, but yeah,
but it may not have been for the circadian rhythm. So we
well,
can tackle that again too. We
okay,
definitely did addiction and genetics,
right. And so those are some great
and I
discussions.
think developmental.
And the beauty is that they can go back and you can always go back and access, that discussion and seeing what was there. So
Yeah.
today we would start off with what's your vote, sis? What would be the one that we have? I have number 4 is circadian rhythm, and it sounds like you're saying you're pretty confident that we already talked about that. So
But we can go over it again. I mean, that's fine. Let's go over that
yeah,
again. I think it's good.
sure,
I think people will get a blessing
no
because I'm
problem. We
not
can
more specific.
definitely. Well, we can talk about sleep. And so many of the
Yes.
wonderful things that take place when you are sleeping. So
Mhm.
you'll hear that the normal desired amount of sleep that's recommended is roughly about 8 hours. But of course, there's going to be a variation. Some are gonna tap out at 6 hours. Some people 7. Some people 8. So there's going to be a range of what does it for each person. For me, my thing
Some
is
people
6 hours. Like,
right.
yeah, for me it's
I was just
six
gonna say
hours.
some people say they feel really good with
I
yeah.
feel I feel really
I
good.
don't
If
know
I
if
get
mine is.
7, then I'm like walking on water. So, but 6, the ideas start flowing and I'm ready to go. I'm excited. I can't. It's like I want to get down to my office and
Mhm.
get going. So yeah, what's the ideal number? So that's the range. What's happening when you sleep? I would leave it to a sleep expert to talk to you about the various phases of sleep and REM and all this other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But some of the wonderful things that are happening when you're sleeping, there's an important term called consolidation. Consolidation. So in mental health, one of the things that we're aware of is that there is the conscious, preconscious, and subconscious. Conscious, of course, that's the experience that we're having right now. We are thinking actively. We're involved in our environment. We're processing. We're analyzing on a conscious level. Pre-conscious is just before consciousness, and then of course subconscious. That's where you're kind of disconnected. You're connected, but you're not aware of the connection. So you're a little disconnected from consciousness. But one of it, and it's almost like when you're sleeping, it submerges the conscious ideas into the subconscious, and that's where it gets reworked on and things get re-represented to you. But then that's where consolidation takes place. That process is what can often transfer things from short-term memory to long-term memory. When you get a number of cycles of sleep after you've been wrestling on an issue,
Right.
that's when it can then transition over into long term. But with a good night's sleep, when you wake up, you can often have eureka experiences. Like, how often have you woken up and you're like, I can't buy that car. I can't afford that. You
Right.
know,
Making sense.
what's that?
I said you're feeling wiser. You're making a better decision.
Right. It's like
Mhm.
the decision now is connected to many other aspects of you, and now you're weighing other facts in,
Mhm.
and it's like you just eureka. Sometimes you're asking the mind a question. Sometimes there's a perplexing problem, and you go to bed and you wake up and I don't know why I didn't think about this before. We could always do X, Y, or Z. And that is one of
Right.
that's one of the advantages of a good night's sleep.
Mhm.
There is a book that is just a gold mine as it relates to sleep. And yeah, I think that confirms that we talked about this because I talked about it last time. Why we sleep,
Yeah.
why we
Yeah.
sleep.
Yeah.
And so Jody's asking, can you really catch up on sleep once you didn't get enough? And so the sleep literature is saying that that is less and less true as we once believed. We once believed that, hey, you can just cover that sleep deficit. But for example, the research is now showing that there is damage to the brain when it is
Mhm.
subjected to a deficit in sleep, and it's not as reparable as once thought. Okay, it's not as reparable as once thought. So this whole feeling that, oh, I can just catch up. I can just expose myself to however the severe sleep deficit, but then I'll be able to catch up. We're finding that it's more of a fallacy, and really getting a good night's sleep on a regular basis and avoiding settings where you are sacrificing sleep within reason, obviously, is something that one should really take to heart. So a good night's sleep facilitates focus. It facilitates your ability to concentrate. It helps with depression. It helps with anxiety. It helps you to be more hopeful. What were you gonna say, sis?
Well, I was just going to say, because I've heard Dr. Nedley actually share this before as well, that because because you said that we need to get a good night's sleep, and so what does that actually look like? Does it matter what time
Very
we
good.
go to bed? Is just any hour at night, does that make a difference? And I've heard Dr. Nedley share about getting the growth hormone by going to bed between the hours of 9 and 10 o'clock, and then that also helps to raise your serotonin levels, which helps with depression. So
And
it's not
because
just,
right, getting sleep
I
is
was thinking,
when
it's
you
not
go
just
to
going to bed, but going to bed
bed
at a certain
at
time.
a certain time.
Um, mhm.
And he's actually talked about it, and it's almost like you get double value of sleep, so that like 2 hours before midnight, for example, would be like more like
Right.
4 hours as opposed to just 2 hours.
Mhm.
So yeah, he definitely has some very interesting commentary on that. But the idea being that it can profoundly enhance your well-being. And I think it was Dr. Schulin. How do you pronounce his name?
Schwartz?
Schweltz. Yeah, Dr.
Yeah.
Schweltz. Man, did he
Schwartz.
drop some science. I
Yeah.
think it was him that had described that, like, when you're sleeping, it's almost like road work. You know how
Yeah.
if you've ever driven somewhere like late at night, you'll notice that there's all this construction taking place because
Right.
it's overnight, and it's almost
That's
like the
what I'm
body
finding.
does that as well. That it's during sleep that so much repair takes place,
Mm-hmm.
and so if you miss the sleep, then that repair might not get an opportunity to take place. In other words, there's just so many things occurring. There's so many things occurring when a person is trying to sleep. Let's see. So we have, I'm depressed, hopeless because of my repetitive sin. I may repent today, but I know I'll do the same thing some other day. I feel like my prayer confession is useless. Help me. I'm having breakdown. So, especially when you are feeling overwhelmed and, you're at that breaking point, please remember to access emergency, services. Remember that 911 is something that you can think about, because we don't take that lightly. There are situations that are like beyond just a phrase and a response, especially over the internet. But that said, I would say you'll want to
Um,
remember people like the Apostle Paul, who
mhm.
he had to constantly contend with the reality that he orchestrated the killing, or he was complicit in the killing of God's heroes. And that was something that he had to grapple with. So we're not talking about just little traffic stops and little light issues. Imagine if you had to deal with the guilt of you were responsible for killing God's heroes. And him having to embrace the faith that God's blood was sufficient for him. So that it can be so important that that we understand that this walk is a struggle. There's a reason Christ says, "Take up your cross and follow me." But that said, in tackling, depressive issues, the hierarchy is obviously, consider 911, and then consider working with your outpatient, provider. The mental health team can consist of a psychiatrist that can prescribe psychiatric medications. And then, of course, you have nurse practitioners that can also prescribe, and both can at times be skilled in therapy. And then you have the range of therapists that can also provide therapeutic interventions. So whether that's a marriage and family therapist or a psychologist, or a social worker that's trained in therapy, or a counselor. There's a range of people that can then provide therapeutic intervention. And therapeutic intervention is significant when we understand that our thoughts affect our mood and our mood affect our thoughts. So that you can see how critical it is that we work on our thoughts so that they don't undermine us. What were you going to say, sis?
Yeah, I just want to say, and I didn't see the name of the person for that comment, but I wanted to see if we can, at Living Manna here, try to assist in helping you find a mental health provider in your area. If you could email us, we could directly maybe assist you in that process. I mean, we're not in your state, but we could help you, try to find someone, or if you're not already working with someone, just to follow up with you. So I'm going to try to put my email on the screen so they can see that, and we can connect with this individual. So it's Atonte at Living Manna Church there, or Dr. Ricardo at livingmanna.church. And we'll just try to stay connected with you and see how the process is going of you getting connected with someone in your area, a mental health professional in your area. So I just wanted to say that.
No, thank you for that. Don't forget to make use of county resources, because county resources can at times
Yes.
meet you where
My
you
audio
are.
is still low. You hear me pretty well? Someone said
I'm
my
hearing
audio
you.
was low, and maybe
I'm
maybe
hearing
because my
you.
microphone is further away from me today than it normally is. Tell me if my audio is better. Is it better?
Yeah, you're good to go.
Okay. Okay,
You're good to
good.
go.
Okay,
Yeah,
another.
yeah. So yeah, and I was just giving you the picture because other people may have that question as well. That look, if
Mhm.
I'm going to devise a plan, a mental health plan, what do I do? And so that's why I want you to understand. And someone did email me asking, hey, what are the various therapists? What are the various mental health
Mhm.
practitioners? And so just kind of running through that. So we talked about the various therapists.
Right.
But we want to honor the reality that it's a battle. Your mental health is a battle. It does require your engagement, and you want to form those connections before you need them, because when mental health crises hit, a lot of times you don't have the energy to put those things in place, and that's why it can be so important to get those networks built before you need them. So that's
Mhm.
something important to realize. If your
Mhm.
brain is overworked, does that affect a person's sleep? So the way I'm going to interpret that question is, what is the recipe for a good night's sleep? And you'll see the answer, how it pertains to that. So believe it or not, if you want the recipe for a good night's sleep is you do need sufficient exhaustion from a mental standpoint. So that's why it's helpful if if you have mentally exerted some energy, whether that's writing or reading or problem solving or what have you. It is good that you've exerted some mental energy. But people who only exert mental energy, they still may go to sleep and notice that they're still kind of, just uneasy and wiry. And so it's
Mhm.
good to get some physical exertion, as well.
Mhm.
And, work this all out with your primary care mental health provider, because we obviously are not your
Mhm.
practitioners. But the bottom line is, so it's good to get that balance of physical exertion, mental exertion, but you're still not ready yet.
Right.
So when you now get to that sleeping time, now we're going to talk about, environment. So
Mhm.
the environment, it's important that the environment is dark,
Right.
because apparently melatonin is released in your brain in direct proportion to the severity of the darkness. So the darker the
Right.
room, the more melatonin is supposedly released, and melatonin is your natural sedative. Okay, so it's almost like you were designed with a built-in sleep medication that is
Mhm.
triggered by the severity of darkness. fearfully
Right.
and wonderfully made. Okay.
Yeah.
The darker it is, the more is released, and it's a natural sedative.
Hmm.
Okay. So
I don't know if you're familiar. I just want to share this really quick. I don't know if you're familiar with sleep hygiene. Have because I sleep hygiene. Have you heard about that?
well,
I
well
share this with my clients.
go for
Just
it. Go for it.
just 30 minutes before you're preparing to go to sleep. It's and when you're saying like if your brain is overworked, can you get a good night's sleep? So there's just ways to just kind of relax and shut the brain down enough so that, and part of what you just shared, being and not having your screen, your cell phone on or your computer at least 30 minutes or so before you're going to sleep. Do a relaxing thing like taking a bath, and don't get in the bed right away when you want to go to sleep. Like sit on your bed or sit in a chair in your room and read a book and just kind of relax. And then within 30 minutes, get in the bed, and then you can fall right to sleep and you're relaxed. So it's basically just um, helping you to relax so that you can get enough sleep and kind of shut your brain down to relax as well. But it's called sleep hygiene. Go ahead.
And what I was calling it is a calming pre-sleep routine. A
Same
calming
thing.
pre-sleep routine. Same thing. So
Same
so
thing.
you've exerted yourself physically, you've exerted yourself mentally, and now you need a calming pre-sleep routine.
Mhm.
It's a routine that informs your body, okay, now we're sleeping. Okay. And so of course there are things to avoid, the screens, it's a nice idea to
Mhm.
avoid those things. There are discussions that it's nice if you can avoid them.
Mhm.
So you get it. You're signaling to yourself, okay, now it's time to go to sleep. The temperature of your room, the research advocates for something that's usually a more on the cooler side. That it's sufficiently dark. We talked about the darkness being in direct proportion to
Mhm.
the release of melatonin, the severity of
Right.
darkness. Let me
Mhm.
see what else. I mean, obviously practical things like, what you're wearing
Yeah.
that being soothing, and, having, it'd be nice to be sleeping in a nice, comfortable bed. All that kind of stuff, helps. But that's the big one. And then the other piece is what you avoid. What you
Mhm.
avoid. So a lot of people, if they pay attention to it, they'll notice that going to bed on a full stomach can be very disruptive to a good
Right.
night's sleep. Does that, and isn't it unfortunate that like everything is designed around eating late at night? The best entrees come out later in the evening. There are
Mhm.
restaurants that don't even
Mhm.
open up until the evening, when in
Right.
fact I'd
When we
love
should
to
already be done with eating, really.
like my ideal is I want a nice robust breakfast. That's where I really want a nice big breakfast, and I want a lighter lunch, and then I'm
A
usually done.
smaller.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm usually done because I ideally would love to be done eating by 2. I want
I think you're supposed to eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and then dinner like a pauper. I'm assuming a pauper eats like just a little bit. So that's I got that from Weimar, but many years ago. But that is how we should be eating, and it makes sense when we're thinking about the sleeping, just because our bodies have to go into that repair time when we're sleeping, and it's mental and physical health that the body is repairing. But then if it has to deal with digesting this big meal, it's just a whole other thing that the body has to do, and then we don't get as good of night rest. So
right,
uh,
because it's almost like going to sleep while there's this huge factory. It's just an illustration, but while this huge
right,
factory is working,
right.
and your body is taking on the task of, processing all that stuff that you've consumed. And and I know that you wake up in the morning and it feels all funny and you got weird tastes in your mouth and all this other kind of stuff, and you don't feel as rested, and it's like, oh,
Right.
that's gonna be a long day. As
Mhm.
opposed to when the stomach is nice and resting, you wake up, the sleep is just so much better. This is a big topic, but it's really important. You get your sleep
Yeah.
down, and it's super helpful. The
Oh, geez.
gastrointestinal system has
Mhm.
a number of waves. Okay, so the gastrointestinal system, that it goes throughout your body, it has, muscles that contribute to there being waves that carry out specific functions. Okay, one of them is called, like, for example, the myenteric plexus, or something like this. But it's this giant wave that will go through, and it's got some cleansing features, but it does require that the stomach has been inactive for like 90 minutes. Like, so it requires a period where you haven't been eating. Like you, it requires a fasting period of 90 minutes in order for it, like every 90 minutes it'll occur. But when you're in a fasting state. And so what you'll see is if you're eating constantly, it'll disrupt that.
Mhm.
So it's an important part of keeping the intestines clean. So just
Mhm.
little things like that. There is an important part for rest. Okay, there's an important part for rest. All right. Anyway, I hope you see how big the topic of sleep is in lifestyle. There's another question: does proper
Mhm.
rest help to improve memory? Um, so to a degree, because obviously, if a person is suffering from one of the cognitive, disorders, such as, for example, Alzheimer's or something like that, um, obviously, sleep is not necessarily going to reverse that kind of memory damage. But that said, we all know that concentration is an important part of being able to memorize something and having memory. And
Mhm.
sleep or a sleep deficit can be incredibly disruptive in concentrating, and therefore it can be really difficult in forming memories. And so, what you can see is that with good sleep, of course, it will support good memory. We said it. It helps with mood. It helps with anxiety. It helps with so many things, and it helps the body repair. So what causes light sleeping? Is it physical or mental? So as people age, the sleep architecture can change, and sometimes people who are more advanced in age at times can have lighter sleep. But there are just a myriad of causes for quote unquote light sleep and what that entails. So you'll want to know that there is an entire discipline of medicine that just deals with sleep. So we're sprinkling lightly on a topic that is absolutely vast.
Mhm.
There are people who literally will specialize in sleep and sleep studies, and they can talk to you about the various phases of sleep and the roles that each phase plays in memory and wellness and lifestyle and so on and so forth. And that's not what we're delving into here, but don't miss the message to take your sleep
Serious.
seriously. Take it seriously because it has a profound impact on your mental wellness and your physical wellness as a whole. So I hope that's been made clear.
The
Um,
question that's on now, can too much sleep affect mental health? And I don't personally know of a study that says too much sleep can affect your mental health, but one of the symptoms of depression is, you know, sleeping all the
Hypersomnia.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So um I say if you're sleeping too much, then you're not, doing the important things of the day that you need to be doing, and then you don't feel like you're at your best, or you're just just not as motivated, and so that definitely affects your mental health in that way.
Any advice for kids who seem to be night owls no matter what you try? Yeah, I mean, so I'm going to humbly say what it is that I remember the tactic I used to use was I would invest energy in exhausting, my daughter, and my younger brother when I was kind of his caregiver, so to speak. But I would invest
Mhm.
energy in, making sure they were tired. And then talk about a calming pre-sleep routine. Come the right time of night, if we went on a little drive, she was out. Like she was before you drove out of the parking lot, she was out.
Yeah.
So that's when you could just turn right back around, scoop her up, and get her right into bed, and you just won yourself about a good 6 7 hours of
Mhm.
peace. So yeah, but the strategies are, the big strategies with kids are program. What is the program? What is the routine? And building into those programs things that exhaust them mentally, things that exhaust them physically, and then getting that calming, pre-sleep routine down. Okay, no, let's chill with the lights. Let's, do so and so forth. Let's shower. That kind of stuff.
Yes.
What else you got?
And and I I mean, we have other hits that we can start to cover. So I, I don't know if there's any more questions about sleep. But we also have one of the other hits out of the 10 hits that can lead to depression is nutrition.
Okay.
So maybe we want to hit on nutrition, how nutrition can be one of the hits that can cause depression.
Yeah, and all along we are talking about books that help in the discussion of these topics.
Mhm,
So definitely Forks Over Knives. There's another
mhm,
book, The End of Overeating. So the bottom line, when we talk about nutrition and depression, the goal is a diet that does not promote inflammation,
mhm.
because they're associating. You're gonna get what you need, my sweet. We're gonna get a cameo by my sweet one. Yeah, absolutely. There we go.
It's okay,
This,
Florence. We love you.
we're gonna have a problem with my agent because I can't work under these kind of circumstances. No,
So yeah, you were talking about inflammation,
yeah,
diets,
yeah. So
anti-inflammatory
if a
diet.
diet is
Hmm.
pro-inflammatory, there's research documenting an increased predisposition to depression. And so the idea being that you want diets that are like anti-inflammatory, and they identify the Mediterranean diet, for example, as being less inflammatory. And of course, a more plant-based, diet is one that's going to typically be more less inflammatory. Huge
Hmm.
topic, huge topic. But yeah,
It is
just
a
some of
huge
the books
topic.
that I found helpful. For example, at least that helped me. The End of Overeating. I believe it's
Mhm.
Dr. I'm not even going to try to guess the name, but The End of Overeating, where he talked about the fact that food that is being designed with a certain ratio of fat, salt, and sugar optimizes, increases
Mhm.
the release of endogenous opiates in our brain. So when you consume these foods with the right ratio of salt, fat, and sugar,
Mhm.
it increases the release of endogenous opiates. So these chemicals that we will consume, the reason that we get impacted by them is because we clearly have receptors, for those chemicals, which also signals that we have internal chemicals that will interact with those receptors to cause the effect. But the idea just being that if I eat this much, to satisfy hunger, if I eat just this much to satisfy hunger, um, I may need to eat this much to satisfy the pain of a painful breakup, the emotional pain of a pain. You've heard of like comfort foods.
Right.
So obviously, there's more of a risk of eating past satiety when your objective for eating is not just hunger, but if you're self-medicating emotional pain. And you
Mhm.
can see why you want to tightly attach eating to satisfying hunger. And then paying attention to just before feeling full, being able to push that plate away at that point and say, okay, I've had enough, rather than you going past that point of fullness and then you really stuff yourself. So
Mhm.
that's just dealing with quantity. Never mind again when you eat, and never mind what you choose to eat. And so we're really painting with broad strokes,
Okay.
but the research is pretty clear that a plant-based diet is one that really can support sort of fighting, against depression. One that is not as
Mhm.
pro-inflammatory, and then a less inflamed state is less likely to be associated with depression, for example.
Mhm.
Go ahead, sis.
Because the plant-based diet has obviously more vegetables that vegetables, fruits and vegetables that help to fight inflammation. Um, so are you saying that um, it's how much you eat and what you eat that helps to um, fight depression.
Well, portion control is an important part
Okay.
of the discussion,
Mhm.
because as you know, as adipose tissue becomes more and more, adipose tissue doesn't just sit
Mhm.
there; it releases chemicals, and some of those chemicals are not necessarily a positive impact on the psyche per
Mhm.
se. So that's why portion control, is an issue, but also one of the things that we can easily develop is food addictions. Food
Mhm.
addictions is one of the rare situations where you can get loaded in front of a person and they can't say a thing to you. You can
Right.
eat with impunity in public, and other than some little judgmental stares or glances, people cannot come up to you and say, "Hey, you're hurting yourself." You
Mhm.
can't do it.
Mhm.
And so it's something where one has to take that personal initiative, that personal responsibility to say, look, I have a problem and let me seek help. But let me get back to
Mhm.
eating because of hunger and stopping before satiety, rather than self-medicating emotional pain with my eating habits, rather than not putting in place measures that treat food addiction. What were you going to say,
Mhm.
Sis?
I was gonna say, would you say all of these hits, and we've only gone over four out of 10, but all of these hits in one way or the other is causing our serotonin levels in our brains to decrease, which um, helps depression or emotion, those feelings of depression to be existent.
The preeminent theory that serotonin deficiency is the only cause of depression, I would say there's more research, coming out that the story is more complicated
Mm-hmm.
than that. So I wouldn't say everything simply is connected to a deficit in serotonin in various parts of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, when the story is finally told about depression, they're going to find that there are many syndromes built into what we're calling depression at this time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the strategies for dealing with depression are going to be much more effective as they are able to subcategorize what the specific uh, uh, components of a unique person's depression are, whatever is the correct language. So I'm saying I think the story is a little bit more complicated than just a serotonin deficit.
Okay.
I think there are other deficits that can also contribute to depression, but the research I think is ongoing in that space. Like, look at inflammation. Look at recognizing that the brain in a more inflamed state is more,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, prone to depression. So they're finding more things. Um,
Yeah, something that I'm very familiar with. I'm actually live on an anti-inflammatory diet for health issues, but it does help you feel much better in so many different ways. But there's so many um, components to that. And I'm not the medical doctor. I mean, you are, but I'm not. You're the psychiatrist. But there's so many components, so many things that can cause inflammation in our diet. Things that you wouldn't even think. Some things that are even um, healthy for us. Not something necessarily bad, but even too many carbohydrates
I,
cause
I
can
want to
cause.
make Thank you for that, sis. And
Mhm.
there was a comment. Now I'm having a hard time undoing the results of it. As far as with the dynamic of eating and feeling like it's like a hole that you're having trouble filling. Um, one of the skills and one of the disciplines that is so critical to develop and nurture is the ability to continue in the effort despite seeing immediate results. That's pivotal. That's
Mhm.
pivotal. And so there are a lot of people who they start a wellness process
Mhm.
and they are very attuned to results. And when those results aren't there, that magnifies the depression. It magnifies a sense of defeat, and that's a huge problem. So,
Mhm.
what's the cure to that? The cure to that is sometimes looking at other markers, such as, hey, I was able to, I started at only being able to do 5 minutes. Now I can do 10. That's a win. So changing the focus from the
Right.
ultimate outcome to performance based. The other piece being develop the routine. Develop the routine. So now the other goal is, hey, I just want to develop the routine. I do not want to pay
Mhm.
any attention to outcome or intensity. I just want the routine. Okay. And this is where a lot of times I see trainers really undermine people because they start them off super, super intense, and that doesn't serve because embedded in the person's mind is how much pain they experience. Rather than develop the routine, intensity will come naturally.
Mhm.
And so I think that statement, now I'm having a hard time undoing the results of it. That's all of us. That's all of us. Um, like we get to that state unnoticeably. And once we're there, my goodness, it takes everything to make the change. So the key is to be able to persist, even with minimal feedback that you're having success, but recognizing you're on a trajectory for improvement. You're on a very, very important trajectory. 1 pound lost a month is still 12 pounds a year. And
Mhm.
that's still 12 pounds a year. And obviously in a decade, that's 50 pounds. That's 50 pounds. That's 1 pound per month. That's 1 pound per month. And
Right.
so it's still significant because the other piece to it is there's the other kicker that's really, really, really cool. Even if you quote unquote only lost 50 pounds, even if you only, but you're not gaining. You're not
Mhm.
gaining, you
Right.
know, and you're moving in the right direction. So
Right.
huge win. You've arrested the bad downward, whatever progression. So anyway, just wanted to highlight that because as we're looking at
Mhm.
changing, that's a huge thing. I don't see any improvement. Well, let's make sure you're looking at the right thing.
Right. Right.
All
All
right.
of these bits are huge topics within themselves. But I want to. I mean, we did circadian rhythm. We did nutrition. One of I don't know, the last one that's number 10, listed in order as he lists them, is the frontal lobe. The
Yeah,
frontal
frontal
lobe.
lobes. This is a big one. This is
Mhm.
but it's a
They're
super
all big.
super important one because we see in our culture a blatant disrespect for the frontal lobes. A
Hmm.
blatant disrespect. You will see people heading the soccer ball. You'll see people doing amateur boxing where they're taking hits in their head. You know,
Hmm.
you'll see people playing football and crashing their heads together. And thank goodness it appears football is trying to move away from that as much as possible. Which is awesome, but it's your most important asset. It's funny because we were talking about like sharing screen. If there was an image I'd want to share with you, my image is I try to depict the brain as a giant diamond. Okay. I try to
Hmm.
depict the brain. It's your giant diamonds. Diamonds are not only a girl's best friend, they're a guy's best friend as well. Especially when you recognize that your brain has the equivalent to a giant diamond. It solves your problems. It's how you enjoy life. It's how we create things. Okay, this is our most important tool. And the recklessness with which we see people as it relates to their frontal lobe. So what?
And maybe our audience, just may not understand what happens in our frontal lobe, like why it's so important. I mean, just describing that this is
Yeah,
where we make our decisions. This
it's where your
is
morality sits. A
yes.
nice illustration of your frontal lobes, especially if imagine if you had a person looking in this direction, you saw their, you know, they were sawed in half. You moved one half of their brain, so the brain is looking out there like this. So this is what we're describing as that, frontal lobe, that frontal part of the brain. It's also called the cerebrum, the covering brain. It's where they say the high order thinking is. By high order, we're talking about morality. We're talking about decision making. We're talking about skills um, such as what is it? Delayed gratification. Okay, these are some of the skills that are supported by the frontal lobes, the prefrontal cortex. So you can imagine dampening impulses coming from the limbic system. Okay, so you may have the urge to do something inappropriate. For example, it's that frontal lobe functioning that says, "Don't say that. Don't do that." I've shared before.
The adult, yeah, I'm sorry. I
No,
call
what
it
were
the
you saying?
adult brain. I call
Yeah,
it when I'm talking to my clients, I call it the adult brain. And
well, I've shared
that passed
before.
from the limbic system is like the child part of our brain that's telling you to do
Right.
something that's not very wise.
Well, I've shared before that part of my secret to marriage is learning, don't say the first thing that comes to mind, don't say the second, don't say the third, the fourth, or the fifth. In fact, don't say it now. Okay, just
Yeah.
hold on a
Don't say it
second.
at all.
Simmer. No, think about it for a while.
Yeah.
You don't have to say it now. And what's helping me do that? The frontal lobes. Okay, the frontal lobes.
Right.
Why on earth would I want to engage
Doc-
in any behavior that damages those frontal lobes? What were
Right.
you going
And
to say,
so
sis?
connecting the frontal, well, I was going to say connecting our frontal lobe to depression. In Dr. Nedley's study that he did, I mean, he's talking about things, elements in our society that can cause our frontal lobe to be affected negatively through things that we listen to, things that we watch, as far as things that are on social media that have that impact. So that is a whole deeper study within itself
I mean,
as
you want
well.
to talk about, like, we can do a show on that. Like, we can straight up do a show just on media, because when you listen to love songs that say something like, "I can't live if living is without you." Sorry, I need to
You're
hit
just
focus.
a
That's what
sought
I need
after
to do.
person today.
I'm sorry. What'd you say?
I said you're just a sought after person today. Your family needs you. The patients need you. Everybody needs you. So
That was not a patient. I'm off call.
okay.
That was not a patient. Don't go getting me in
Okay.
trouble, sis. Yeah, I'm not. I'm off call. I would not be like, you can wait. That's not how this
Yeah.
works. I would have to jump off of this
Disclaimer.
and be like, sis, I got a phone call I got to take. But no, I'm not on call at this time. Um, but the media, like we are so quickly disregard what it means to listen to a song that says, "I can't live without this person." What are you saying? Like, listen to that. That's pretty powerful language, especially if you
Right.
sing it over and over and over again. Remember what we said. Thoughts affect the mood, and your mood affect the thoughts. So things can slip in there and provide thoughts that will then downgrade your mood. What were you going to say, sis?
No, I was just kind of saying with you what you were saying.
Right.
Our thoughts affect our mood, and then our mood affects
Like,
our
and
behavior.
it's interesting because I'm sure you can recall if you've had a breakup or something's going on emotionally, and you're kind of drawn to these songs that will mimic your emotions, and it just makes you feel awful. It's like it pulls you down even more. So never mind movies. Like, if if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a movie is worth a million. A video is worth a million. So it's really starting to pay attention and ask yourself, how do I feel after I've watched that? How do I feel? What are the thoughts that now just keep going through my mind over and over again? And could I do a better job of choosing content that that leaves me feeling uplifted? So that is something that is worth exploring for sure. But no,
And I want to, yeah,
fantastic.
I just wanted to say again, I think I said this a couple weeks ago too, but just, in the study that Dr. Nedley did with the 10 hits, it just showed that 4 or more of the hits um, led to depression. And I
Or
know you had shared last time, like addiction, like in itself, like a drug addiction in itself could, definitely lead a person as they're trying to recover, or could lead to depression. I mean, just trying to go through that process.
right.
But in his study, it showed that 4 or more of these hits can lead to depression. And so it just when they are dealing in this program, depression recovery, they're not again necessarily dealing with all of these things, but they found that if they dealt with if they got it down to 4 or less hits, they were recovering from depression at a much faster rate. So I just found that pretty interesting.
Right. Well, yeah, it's a numbers game. His research was definitely something that was, statistical, and so but I just wanted to be clear. Take, for example, some of a medical hit. You can have hypothyroidism alone,
Right.
be hypothyroid, and boom, So I just, and again, I mentioned, with addictions, for example, you could be on one drug per se, and let's say like methamphetamines, and it deplete your dopamine, and boom, but the idea just being, so imagine a person who's hit with 4 of those things, and then also to keep in mind that those things, it's really hard to isolate them to one thing, so they kind of are going to come along with stuff, but yeah, the idea just being, looking at how resilient our mind is, that it can sustain so many things, and sometimes still the person won't succumb. And so, but the idea just being, it's a great model to look at, that my goodness, let me screen to see how many of these things are relevant to me, how many things are in play, and how can I mitigate them? Because that was the other thing that was great about his study, that he's like, okay, well, let me assess a person, let me see what their hits are, and let me try to do something about that. And that's a different model, I would say, than traditionally, and so that's why I think it's incredibly, powerful to say, let me really try to see what is the syndrome that describes this person's depression. I think that's incredibly powerful and useful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just like that, sis. Just like
I
that.
know it's we have 1 minute left, but I just want to thank everyone who tuned in and asked their questions. I want to recommend a book. I put it way up in the beginning of the chat, and maybe Amra, our producer, can put it on there. But it's called "Get Out of Your Head." That's a book that I recommend to clients that are dealing with depression. It's dealing with your thoughts, and it's by Jeannie Allen. "Get Out of Your Head." So I don't know if she's going to able to put that up. She's probably typing that right now. So that's one of the main books that I tell clients about. I'm pretty much coming from a behavioral therapist point of view, and I just find that with depression, it really helps with just really be helping people become aware of their thoughts and what their thoughts are doing, the toxic thoughts and the automatic thoughts and the negative thoughts. So that's just one of the books that I recommend, but I'll probably put it in the chat here, but then you can tell your book while I type this in the chat.
Sis, I'm going to also recommend a book. I know the author.
Okay.
He's a pretty good guy. It's Killing Burnout.
Okay. Yes. You're the author.
Yeah, I'm the author of that. And what it really deals with is just a comprehensive approach to killing burnout. Because there are these key vital areas of our lives that we're supposed to design strategies for optimizing ourselves. So yeah, Killing Burnout, you can go to killingburnout.com and you can check out the resources that we feature there. But the idea just being, our approach, to mental health needs to be an active one. Needs to be an active one. Like, make a plan. It's important. So please don't be passive and just stay at the state that you're in. It requires you to be active in moving towards health. and protecting yourself from sources that will depress you,
Right.
protecting your frontal lobe.
Mm.
Um, we still next week can talk about toxicity. We can talk about some of the more prominent medical. And I
Mm.
think in the context of social, it'll allow us to talk about boundary setting, the importance of boundary setting. What are decisions that you
Yeah.
can make
Mhm.
in order to protect yourself from depression? Sis, it's
Mhm.
always a pleasure. Just
It
playing.
is. It is. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of things that we can continue to discuss on depression because we talked about the hits, but there's definitely more that we can talk about, things that people can do um, for themselves that can help. Of course, working with a mental health professional is very important too, determining what level of depression you are at. But those definitely things that we can talk about. As we come back. I have to say this, and we didn't get to talk about this before, but I actually won't be here next week. Have the last family trip of the summer with my kids before they go back to college. Well, my baby one is going to college for the first time, but and so it wouldn't be for 2 weeks that we would have mental health.
Well,
Month.
this gives them a chance to review the prior lessons,
That's right. That's
Sister.
right.
So yeah, it's like
So
a lot of stuff that's digested, and then of course you can come back with your questions and stuff. And safe
right.
travels to you.
Thank you.
Um,
I think we're
safe
going to your. You're from New York, right? But we're going to Connecticut. Were you from Connecticut? I thought you were.
I grew up.
No.
Yeah, I left New York and I went to Connecticut. You're exactly right.
Oh, that's right. You went to school there.
So I went to
Okay.
University of Connecticut for medicine, but like, yeah, my family lives in Connecticut, now. So
Yeah, we're going up in that area.
and we always want to remind you to remember to give, to make these kind of programs viable. I'm
Yes.
really proud of a church that is so committed to saying, "Hey, we want something for you every day of the week."
Yes.
And it's so awesome, man. Tuesday, man, the programs,
Are
just
amazing.
amazing, programs subsequently. So please give to Living Manna so that it can continue to do the Lord's work. And if you want a treat, don't forget to tune in on Saturdays.
Yes.
There is a young man, a pastor that you may know, Sister Atonte,
Mhm.
who is just committed to, just dividing the word in a way that it puts what we're seeing today in a light that can just help you with your perspective and help you understand a bigger picture. And so don't forget to tune in on Saturdays. I'm convinced that you'll be blessed with thought. Remember, we talked about the fact that some mental exertion is really helpful.
Yeah.
Well, that can be a really helpful part of you, mentally exerting yourself, because he is going to deliver some living manna,
That's
that,
right.
that you can
You
actually
can learn.
apply.
Yes, you can learn all about the church by visiting the website, and that's where you can give if you'd like to financially support. But livingmanna.live, and it's on your screen, so you can visit our website, hear about the other programs that we have during the week, and then just learn more about the church as well. So we just want to thank everyone who has watched. We want you to make sure you go to our Instagram page and follow us, and share this program with your friends and family members. And we look forward to being back with you in 2 weeks. But while we're gone, you can go back and watch the this one again, and the one before that, but also programs before that. We were talking about anxiety and phobias. So if you want to catch up and get information on that, you can also watch those as well. And so we have lots of information that you can catch up on. And then you can also get those books that we mentioned that will help you as well. That's what we recommend to our clients and to our patients. So we look forward to having you back in 2 weeks. And I thought about it after we were mid going through this, that we opened up in prayer before we started, but we didn't open up in prayer when we got on. So we're going to close in prayer, and then I'm going to ask you, Dr. Whyte, to close us out in prayer.
Absolutely. Shall we bow our heads? Our Father and our God, we thank you so much for this space that you created for us to really see that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And also, there are things that we can do to push us towards wellness, especially mental wellness. So please be with us in the strategies that we employ, the boundaries that we set, and so that we can be viable and we can be servants for your kingdom. Please be with Sister Atonte and Pastor Myers as they travel. Please keep them safe from all harm and danger, seen and unseen. Please be with their families. And Lord, thank you so much for living that. We pray this in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. All right. Have a good
All
evening,
right.
everyone.
Till we meet again.